Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Sarah Palomo. I'm a board member of the Ninth Candle. Thank you for spending your evening with us, and welcome to our virtual event. So this event is called The Assignment: The Dangers of Teaching the Holocaust Through Activities and How to Avoid Them. So we are excited to be joined by teachers and audience members from across the US. The Ninth Candle, if you're not familiar with us, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization founded in Chicago in September 2020. In our organization, we're working to promote education, tolerance, and diversity in communities. And tonight we will be speaking with the award-winning writer, Liza Wiemer, about her book, The Assignment. And we'll also be discussing the future of Holocaust education in the US with Amber Mays, the Holocaust Educator and Human Rights Associate at the Indianapolis Jewish Community Relations Council. And of course, with Luke Berryman, the Ninth Candle founder. So we'll touch on some of the controversial problems in Holocaust education today. And at the end, we will have Q&A. So audience members will have a chance to ask their questions, and you're able to submit questions through the Q&A feature as we go. So now I will let our panelists introduce themselves. So if we want to first start with Liza, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Hi, it is truly an honor to be here with everyone, and a big thanks to Luke Berryman and Sarah Palomo, I apologize for mispronouncing that, of the Ninth Candle. They are doing incredible work throughout the United States on Holocaust education and connecting it to what's going on in society today, which leads to my novel, The Assignment. The Assignment is a book that was inspired by true events that occurred in February and March of 2017 in a small town in upstate New York. It turned out that I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but I happened to have been in that small town when the assignment that inspired this novel was given. Essentially what happened was students received an assignment to pretend that they were Nazis and debate the merits of the final solution. So that's how that is a little bit of background on what inspired my novel. I have written 2 adult nonfiction books, another young adult novel. I'm been very involved in education for over 25 years. And I'm so proud to say that the assignment has won multiple awards, including the Sidney Taylor Notable Award. So that's a little bit about me, and I'll pass it on to Sarah.
Great. Thank you, Liza. And we're going to talk more about your book, but before then, let me go ahead and let our other panelists introduce themselves. So Amber, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Hello, welcome everyone, and thank you both to Luke and Sarah for asking me to be here this evening. I'm Amber Mays. I'm with the Indianapolis Jewish Community Relations Council. I serve as the Holocaust Educator and Human Rights Associate. My background is in Holocaust history and education, as well as mass atrocity prevention education and advocacy campaigning. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Amber. Luke, if you want to go ahead and please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Liza. Thank you, Amber. And thanks to everyone who's tuned in for this. I'm so excited to be doing another Ninth Candle event, and especially one that is bringing together educators and other organizations that are all seeking to address the same issue that the Ninth Candle is seeking to address. So my name's Luke Berryman. I founded the Ninth Candle in September of 2020. My background, not dissimilar to Amber's, it's in Holocaust history and also in education, and bringing those 2 things together into this new organization, which is ending to end anti-Semitism by sharing knowledge, had been a long-standing goal, and certainly for the Ninth Candle since we've been founded, it's been an exciting time. We've done a few events. We've had a bit of coverage in the Chicago Tribune and the Jerusalem Post, and so yeah, it's exciting to feel like it's growing. But at the same time, I firmly believe there's no silver bullet here. It's going to be a group effort if we're to improve the situation in the US, and that's why I'm so excited that we're able to do this event today.
Great. Thank you, Luke. So for the first half of our time tonight, it's going to be with Liza, and then the second half will be with Luke and Amber. But if at any point you have questions, like I mentioned earlier, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box. Okay, Liza, are you ready for our question time?
I am. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so I know you talked a little bit, you gave a very brief overview about the assignment and sort of the background, but can you talk a little bit more about that assignment that inspired your book and these other enactment activities that you have heard of?
Yeah, it was really an extraordinary situation because as I said, I was in this small town. I was there for a book signing for my first young adult novel. And there was a series of incredible events that led to this moment. So instead of going into those details, I just tell our listeners to go to lizawiemer.com and they can read about the behind the scenes information. There's just page after page of incredible circumstances that led to this, and even, ending up in this small town. So what ended up happening is I ended up opening up Facebook and seeing that an assignment had been given to students, asking them to speak in favor of the Holocaust. And I was shocked. So I clicked on the article. I was on Facebook, and when I looked at the first line, it said that this took place in Oswego, New York. That's where I was. And I couldn't believe it. I just thought, of all the thousands of small towns in the United States, here I am. And so I started reading more and more about this. And the students were given a memo, asked to pretend that they were one of the Nazi leaders that came together for the Wannsee Conference, which is where the Nazi leaders came together to actually implement the final solution. There was never any kind of debate. There were no two sides, should we exterminate Jews or not exterminate Jews? That was never a question. There was some discussion, and people can watch the movie Conspiracy to see one of the most accurate portrayals of the Wannsee Conference. That's a movie that was put by HBO. So it's available on HBO or on Amazon Prime. But these students were, the sides that they were supposed to take was either exterminate Jews outright or put them in work camps, ghettos, and also they had to contemplate sterilization. And that was never clear from any of the articles, that second part, the contrast. But the real students were asked to write a paper in support of one of these positions. So this shocked me. And I was so inspired by the two brave teens who spoke up and said that this was wrong. That was Archer Shurtleff and Jordan April. And as I'm reading about these two brave teens, I kept thinking, I got to figure out a way to meet them. How can I meet them? I'm not going to any high school though, so I'm not going to see them there. I'm in this community. I have no idea. I don't want to just show up at their homes. And so I made the decision that I was going to ask the bookstore owner where I was speaking. My plan was to purchase 2 copies of my debut young adult novel. I was going to write each one of the kids a note and send it ask him to help me get their addresses and send it to these teens. as it turned out, I didn't need to do that because I took 4 steps into the bookstore, looked up, and recognized one of the teens from a photo that I saw in an article. And I went, oh my gosh, it's the world famous Jordan. And she looked at me and she said, how do you know who I am? And I said, let me show you my phone. I've been reading all about you, and I think you're so brave for speaking up against that assignment. And so that is what led me on this incredible journey to learn more about assignments like this. And as I said, I utilized this as the inspiration for my novel. At the time, I thought it was really unique. I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe that a teacher would give an assignment like this. And I ended up writing an article that was published in publications across the country about my experience. And then I started doing research for the book. I had approached the teens and said, what would you think about me writing a book that, is inspired by this assignment, inspired by your bravery? And I said, it's not going to be about you. It's going to be a complete work of fiction. And they were, real excited about it. And so that is kind of what led me on this incredible journey to learn more about assignments like this.
Wow. Wow, what a remarkable coincidence in that story, Liza. That's really incredible, and right place, right time. And certainly glad you were able to write a book about it and draw more awareness to these type of assignments. You mentioned, you were at first shocked. You didn't think they would be popular. And let me ask your perspective. Why do you think these assignments are popular? Why are these assignments being used to teach about, something like the Holocaust?
I think that there was a time where reenactments was very popular. I think education has thankfully evolved a tremendous amount, and people are recognizing the damage that these assignments cause, and they cause tremendous damage. I also think that we're at a time in society where people are speaking up against injustice and recognizing that this is not a healthy way to teach empathy and compassion. So there's a number of reasons why I believe we are seeing more of them and people are speaking up, because there is this recognition that that advocating or pretending that we're Nazis is curriculum violence. It causes harm. And people are saying, whoa, wait a minute, I don't want to do this. This isn't okay. I think it's been around for a very long time, but we're seeing more and more that people are recognizing the harm that it's causing. So I believe so much of it is just the awareness. I believe they are continuing. Why we are still seeing these kind of assignments is that educators are misguided. I think that it's thoughtless. Yes, there are times when assignments like this, a teacher gives them, and it's absolutely from a perspective of they believe that what they're doing is right. So for example, here in Wisconsin, we've seen several assignments where it involves slavery, where a teacher gave an assignment where she asked students to write down 3 good reasons for slavery and 3 bad reasons for slavery. It's appalling. And recently, 6th graders were given an assignment, and the line was, part of the assignment was, how would you punish these slaves? And I think that there was such an unbelievable disconnect because it's so racist and so hateful. And we're seeing this with anti-Semitic assignments where, asking students to advocate for the Nazi position. Recently, there was one in Irvine, California, where a teacher asked students to recreate the 1932 Reichstag election and present the Nazi position. And a brave teen spoke up and said, this isn't okay. And her parents had to get involved. I was tagged on Twitter. I, also provided information. And eventually the school did back down. The ADL got involved. And with that position power, that made all the difference. But just like in the assignment that has inspired this novel, the teacher, the administration at first was like, there's nothing wrong with this. We've been teaching this for years. And this, what is so frightening to me is that this curriculum is in existence throughout the United States. So the Irvine, California assignment was actually part of curriculum that was sold through an organization for AP World History. Now, here we had a brave teen who spoke up, but what about all those schools that are still teaching this curriculum and no one is saying that it's wrong? And that's truly appalling, and it's a problem. And I think it's a serious problem.
Right. Thank you, Liza. Yes, absolutely. I like your point about perhaps these activities and assignments were always happening, but now students are finally speaking up and bringing awareness to them, like the brave students that you sort of based your story off of in the assignment, and also, the student in Irvine, California. Let's talk a little bit more about the assignment. So how would you say, students who read the assignment, how are they able to, learn from the assignment, your book, and also connect the past and the present? How does the assignment, your book, help them do this?
So first of all, we have to acknowledge the fact that speaking up in general against any kind of injustice is very difficult. It's very difficult for adults. It's much easier when you're in a large group. If you're out marching for a particular cause, you're one out of many. But when assignments like this come up, oftentimes it's there aren't a number of people speaking up. It may be one particular parent, or it might be one particular student. So for younger classes, we see that, a parent might see for 5th grade or 6th grade. But when it comes down to high school, many parents are not aware of the assignments that their students are receiving. So to go to your question and what I was saying about how difficult it is, why my novel is so critical is it really shows different ways for students to be allies and to be upstanders. So very similar terms. In the case of my main characters, that's Cade and Logan. Cade and Logan, they're upstanders. They speak up, they go right to the teacher, they tell the teacher that they're uncomfortable with this, and they don't back down. But then there are other students that really struggle. They don't want to, be, first and foremost and out there and in front of other students in this kind of situation. They're worried, like all of us, I think, when we face a situation where we have to, we see an injustice, we don't want to get targeted, and that's our instinct. So in this situation, I have other characters that show other ways. And so the beauty about reading a book like this is that we're able to see ourselves and say, I identify with that particular character. So I may not feel comfortable being a Cade or a Logan, but maybe I could be a Daniel. And Daniel did some, his things. by writing a letter to the teacher, and there was a protest and other things that were different. So we need those mirrors and windows for students to find themselves within it. What's so critical and what makes my novel so unique is that it takes the history of the Holocaust and connects it to the hatred that we're seeing today within society, not just anti-Semitism, but racism and anti-LGBTQIAP actions and all sorts of injustices, because we need to learn from the past in order to change what we're seeing in the present. If there is a disconnect, how do we learn? And so I feel very strongly that we can't teach Holocaust education without showing what's going on in society today. So for example, if we are learning about racism today, how do we not go back and learn about people who were enslaved in the United States? That history connects to what we're experiencing here. Same thing with anti-Semitism. It's not just even the Holocaust, though that's what I focus, and that's what the Ninth Candle focuses in on. But anti-Semitism has been around much longer than that, for thousands of years. This connection is critical. So I really push hard, and everything in my novel makes that connection between the past and to the kind of hatred that we're seeing in society today. We need to, in order to be upstanders, in order to be allies, we have to understand those roots. And if we don't understand that roots, it's something that was in the past. We don't feel it. It's not as personal or immediate, and it is immediate. We're seeing it, with other assignments that are being given. We're seeing it all over the internet with, comments, and we're seeing it, across our country, and it needs to stop.
Right, exactly. Thank you, Liza, for sharing some really valuable insights. And I have two more questions before we move to the second half, Liza. But first, tell us where we can buy your book, right? Where can we find it? And then also tell us sort of the recommended age. I know you said young adult, but what does that mean? Will adults still like it? Will younger kids like it? What do you recommend?
Thank you so much for that question. So the book is available everywhere. It can be purchased from any online venue that sells books. It's also available at every independent bookstore. If people want a signed copy, I have those available through Boswell Books. Just go to my website, lizawiemer.com, and the link is there. Who is this book appropriate for? That is such a great question. So I have had 11-year-olds write to me and tell me how this book has impacted them. And it is officially, 12 and up. I've heard from people in their 80s and 90s who have read this book. And what I love about it is how each individual is able to see themselves in some way, see that connection, and identify with these characters in some way. But it's also being utilized in schools and as a part of curriculum. So I've seen it being embraced in 7th and 8th grade, and also in high school classes. So we're seeing that it is being taught. And if anyone has any interest, I'm working right now with a foundation to get sets of books into public schools across this nation. So people are welcome to reach out. We can get sets to an entire grade or just a particular class, but that's something that's really exciting, because they're seeing the value of this novel as far as how to teach the Holocaust, but also make it relevant to students and what they're experiencing today.
Great, thank you. And Liza, let me just say, I'm very grateful that you have, shared this story and you've elevated these voices. And, I think it's so exciting that the book may soon be in all schools across the nation, right? That's incredible.
It'd be
So
amazing.
yes, absolutely. I echo that as well. So thank you, Liza. Thank you for joining us. If you want more information, please check out Liza's website. I know she mentioned it. I'll let her say it one more time before we move to our second half of the event. Go ahead, Liza.
So go to lizawiemer.com and I have my email there. So please feel free to contact me. I'm absolutely available to everyone. If you don't hear from me within 24 hours, just reach out to me again because I like to stay on top of it. So thank you so much. And thanks to the Ninth Candle for the incredible work that you're doing to change this world for the better.
Great. Thank you, Liza. Thank you very much. Okay, so we will shift to the second half of our event. So I will ask Luke and Amber to please go ahead and turn your cameras back on. Great. I'm seeing you both on screen now. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in. So obviously we're talking about these assignments that inspired Liza to write her novel. But now let's talk a little bit about the education piece and from your experiences. So Amber, I'm going to start with you. Can you talk a little bit more about your organization and how it provides resources for schools and for students, to help educate them about the Holocaust?
Sure. So first and foremost, I'm going to apologize if you hear a buzzing. My neighbor has decided it's time to mow the lawn. So of course. But the local Jewish community and pretty much every Jewish community around the country really typically has somebody that is dedicated specifically to Holocaust education. Because for I think some obvious reasons, it's incredibly important to the Jewish community for us to make sure that the Holocaust and its contemporary connections are being taught in an accurate and pedagogically sound way. So the Indianapolis JCRC, we really kind of approach it full force, I suppose you could say. We offer presentations. So a lot of times I will get requests for mainly members of a speakers bureau. So those are going to be survivors or second generation survivors who come into your classroom and tell their family story. So your students at that point are hearing and seeing that this isn't just a piece of history. This is something that has impacted lives and now generations. And I would highly suggest, wherever you are, most federations have a speakers bureau, and that is such a meaningful way to really connect the history and personalize it. Another thing that we do as JCRC is we have a website that has educational resources on it that have already been hand selected and verified, so that the information that you're receiving is it's meant for a classroom, it's lesson plans, it's curriculum that contains the historically accurate information, but also some of that social emotional learning. And another thing that we do about twice to 3 times a year is professional development workshops. So we'll have educators, we'll either work with national organizations, and we're hoping to work with Ninth Candle this summer. work with national organizations who can come in and we can discuss, what does it look like to have an appropriate curriculum that teaches the Holocaust and makes those contemporary connections, as Liza was saying, to what we're seeing in society and the world around us today. And then also, I just serve as a resource. I will get emails from educators, and educators throughout the state know that they can always email me, and I will answer the questions that they have and point them in any sort of direction. So that's, I guess I'll also mention another thing that we're hoping to work on is developing a more robust Holocaust education mandate for Indiana. We have one. It is incredibly weak. Basically, if you say Nazis killed, Jews and however many millions of other people, you pretty much satisfied the mandate in this state. And that's not good enough. So we're really hoping to begin to build a relationship with the DOE, the Department of Education, and get a more robust mandate. And I think that educators have an opportunity to become more involved in that process as well. Because it is their classrooms, it's their students. And I think that their voices should be, should join in that that advocacy sort of effort around more robust education.
Thank you, Amber, for sharing a little bit more about your organizations and the resources that exist. And it sounds like you're doing great. You and your organization are doing great work. Let me go ahead and toss that question now to Luke.
Yeah, so I think with the Ninth Candle, we really look to partner very proactively with schools. One of our kind of starting premises is that there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all approach for Holocaust education, and that means that when we go into a school, what we're doing is asking them what they want. We're asking them about the state of Holocaust education in their school. Following on from something Amber said, it's also framed by what's happening in their particular state. And so, some of the schools that we've gone into are teaching the Holocaust for the first time this year. Others, we've gone into places where they've got a super robust history department and they've been teaching the Holocaust for years and they're connected to their local Jewish organizations and so on and so on and so on. It would be naive to imagine that you could use the exact same material in both of those places. So for us, we welcome the opportunity to collaborate with schools. We love working with teachers and hearing about what they want to do. And so what the end product will be is a visit to the school, either virtually or in person, to go through a presentation or series of presentations that match the curriculum that the school is trying to build across the course of the year. So we're trying actively to complement what the teachers are doing, to build on it, and then also to provide them with a platform that they can use going forward. And then again, the other thing that we'll do is professional development, which will mean working with teachers directly and giving them materials that they can use in class after class after class, and just helping them develop their ideas for what is, after all, an incredibly difficult topic to teach. So yeah, that's how the Ninth Candle is operating right now.
Great. I want to get back to something Amber mentioned about how, some teachers will email her, they'll reach out to her. So I'm curious, and in both of your experiences, and again, maybe we'll start with Amber, how comfortable are teachers, teaching the Holocaust, reaching out to you in your conversations? Are they comfortable with what interactions could occur in the classroom? So just sort of curious from your own perspective as assisting in Holocaust education.
Yeah, so I would say in my experience that educators have been fairly comfortable reaching out to me, specifically, looking for resources, translating that into the classroom as far as teaching the Holocaust. I think educators and the conversations that I've had with educators over the past several years who have either had a speaker come to their classroom or attended a professional development workshop for the first time have said that they find the topic so daunting. And so them reaching out to me was really like, I don't want to necessarily say a cry for help, because that's not necessarily the best phrase, but was really looking to move beyond the methods that they had been using before. They've struggled with how to answer some of the questions that come up, how to connect it to what is happening in the world today while still doing justice to the memory of the victims of the Holocaust. And but I mean, I think that I have noticed more people reaching out to me in the past year, or more attending professional development workshops, who have said, I've been teaching the Holocaust for 25 years, and I never thought I would come to a professional development workshop, because why should I? But then they were starting to realize that they were having difficulty addressing some of the conversations that were coming up in the classroom, or difficulty addressing some of the things that they were seeing, in the world around them, that was also kind of becoming, that was kind of being on display and almost like the microcosm of their school. I guess I don't know if that answers your question. But.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Amber. Really appreciate your insight in your experience these past couple of years working with teachers. Luke, I didn't know if you had anything to add to that answer.
I mean, only to echo what Amber's saying, which is that, yeah, I think that in my experience too, there is a certain level of discomfort, perhaps, with teachers talking about the Holocaust and about building a syllabus. I suspect, as Amber said, it's simply because the topic is so daunting. And for that reason, it's perfectly understandable that it's hard to know where to begin with this stuff. And even if, like, Amber's teacher has been, doing this for 25 years, even so, the sheer quantity of material that's out there, both for teaching it, but also just in terms of raw historical material, knowing what to include, what not to include. I mean, I find it difficult. So I think it's perfectly understandable that people would have levels of discomfort talking about this thing. I think another factor is that it's just swirling with myths, right? And it's, that the reason for that is so complicated. It's got to do with how entrenched the Holocaust is in pop culture and what people have seen on the big screen and things like that. So all sorts of myths that needs to be picked apart from the facts. But then the other thing is that the Holocaust is not, this is not an episode in human history that has been adequately resolved, right? We're still studying the Holocaust, we're still learning about it. In January 2020, the US Holocaust Memorial Museum took possession of a vast trove of photographs of the Sobibor extermination camp, of which there were previously only 3 or 4. So, there's raw material that's still out there being discovered. There are people who are still being tried for participating in the Holocaust. So, in many ways, we're reacting to it in real time still. And again, understandably, because it's a vast event, which means it's difficult to teach. It's difficult to learn about. And I think that's what organizations like ours are trying to help with.
Great. Thank you, Luke. So speaking of a lot of materials out there for teaching the Holocaust, it seems like more and more the subject of the Holocaust is being taught through literature classes. So curious to hear your opinions on how is this changing the landscape of Holocaust education when students are learning about it, not through history courses, right, but maybe through their literature classes. either Luke or Amber, whoever wants to go first.
Do you want to go first, Amber, with that one?
Sure, I can jump in there. Yeah, I think it makes it in some ways slightly more challenging. I think on behalf of the educators, many of the educators that are coming to me for either professional development or resource requests are in the literature classroom. There's the first time that they're teaching night, which is typically taught in high school, and they're like, I now have 3 weeks and I have to provide context. How do I do that? I'm not a social studies teacher, and yet social studies educators find themselves having less and less time to dedicate to the Holocaust. So in one way, students they're not necessarily getting the full view that they might get in a social studies classroom, where they're getting a little bit more of the context, the build up to some of the root causes of why the war happened, how it happened. But at the same time, they are getting more of this in-depth opportunity that most social studies educators do not have time to be able to commit to. I have also, in my experience, found that many literature teachers are actually enjoying the opportunity to provide some of these conversations and some of the history and connecting it to local communities, such as through bringing in a member of our Speakers Bureau to really kind of help round out what they're talking about in their unit. And many of them are struggling, I think, to figure out which resources best fit analyzing a novel, analyzing a memoir, and also providing more of that historical background piece. And so I think that as we move forward and we continue to try and navigate what does the future of Holocaust education look like, we're really going to have to take the time to analyze and come up with curriculum or methods. And of course, there are curriculum, there are lesson plans and things out there that do focus on it from a literary lens, but I think that's where we're going to really see or continue to see this shift occurring. And we have to be able to flex, I'm gonna say, and move with that trend, and also be forward thinking of how are we going to address what memoirs, what can we suggest for literature teachers to read in the classroom? Why are certain books better than others when discussing the Holocaust? And I think that a lot of educators are also starting to ask some of these questions.
Thank you for that answer, Amber. Luke, go ahead.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that when the Holocaust is shifted to a literary context, it becomes a still more complicated equation. I think the fact that we seem to have a relentless focus on a handful of books again makes it even more problematic. Amber mentioned Night, the Elie Wiesel text, and Night is a wonderful book, but it's also abstract, it's dark, it's very, very poetic, and it's very fluid because of that. And if you don't have some kind of solid context into which you can pour that fluid and make sense of it, I think it's just going to be so difficult for students to grasp. So yeah, absolutely. I also would advocate for you know, for maybe a rethinking or a remodeling of the landscape, the way this subject is taught in that context. Another thing that I would say about it is that this maybe loops back to what Liza was talking about right at the beginning, which is that with these assignments, I think that in a literature class, in a creative writing class in particular, there's always going to be a need to create and to have activities and so on and so on and so on. That's a part of a literary class, and therefore the danger of these assignments sneaking in is that much greater. Yeah, you know, we see things like schools just not. I mean, sometimes it's a matter purely of practicality, right? The reason that they don't want to replace, say, their 20 copies of The Boy in the Striped Pajamas is because they cannot afford to do so, right? They simply don't have the money to do so. And then once term starts, it's really busy. If you're a teacher, it's an incredibly difficult job. You're working so many hours a week, and then you've got this massive subject coming up ahead of you. And so what do? You fall back on whatever was done the year before. And I think, you know, it just ends up being this cycle where it kind of solidifies a little bit more each year, and the cycle becomes that bit harder to break. But again, I think that's why you know, it's so important that organizations like ours are working together to give teachers the help that they need.
Great. Thank you, Luke, for providing your answer as well. So we are getting close to wrapping up now. So I'm going to ask a question that had been submitted ahead of time. So to Luke and Amber and Liza, so looking at the future of Holocaust education, both, you know, your nonprofits, Luke and Amber, are committed to Holocaust education and furthering education. What does the future look like to you? Is there room for, you know, collaboration with other nonprofits, like how the Ninth Candle, you know, wants to collaborate? And I think we'll be doing, you mentioned the professional development workshop in the summer, Amber, with you. Is there room for future collaboration? What do you think of when you think of the future of Holocaust education? And Liza, I will also give you a moment to answer this as well, but perhaps whoever wants to start. Amber, I'm looking at you, so if you want to go ahead and start.
Sure. I think that the future of Holocaust education and education in general is, it has to be built around collaboration. It has to be built around collaboration between organizations that, you know, this is their focus. And it has to be built around collaboration between those organizations and the school systems, and not necessarily even just one classroom in particular, one school in particular, which is kind of more of the model, just because of how we have to operate, because unfortunately Holocaust education is not the only thing that JCRC does. But with the school districts at large, you know, if we are able to work with Ninth Candle, work with Liza, and also work with the superintendent of schools to really kind of have conversations about what the future of Holocaust education could look like for their entire school system, then we're really setting up not just educators, but students up for success. Yeah, I think that's where I'll end it right there.
I mean, I would certainly agree with all of that. I think my experiences, especially since the Ninth Candle was founded, you know, I've obviously learned about nonprofits in general, and I think sometimes there can be a reticence among nonprofits. I'm not just talking about Holocaust education or even just education, but nonprofits in general. There can be a reticence to work together. I think they can feel under tremendous pressure to stake out their own turf and you know, to kind of have their own claim to legitimacy, and sometimes that can get in the way of working toward a common goal. And you know, I think in this instance, the common goal is just too important, and that's why, yeah, absolutely, I see collaboration as being a critical part of the future for sure.
So this has been such a fantastic conversation, and I've just enjoyed listening to Amber and Luke so much. I look at this from a deeper why. As an educator myself with over 25 years experience, and what we're seeing in with our students today. Recently, there was a study that was done by the Claims Conference 2020. You can find it online. Nearly 2/3 of all millennials and Gen Z did not know that 6 million Jews were murdered during the Holocaust. Now that's just a statistic. But what that says is that the very, very, very basic that there's not this understanding, and Holocaust education isn't being communicated. And why is it so important? It's so important because it teaches a sense of compassion. It teaches that these kind of things happen because we as a society allow it to happen. And it has to, we're seeing it today. You know, genocide, this is not something that happened in the 1940s. We're seeing genocides today. We are seeing an increase in hate crimes across this nation. By teaching Holocaust education, statistics have shown that that has been reduced tremendously. When we see numbers like nearly 2/3 of all Gen Z and millennials, that they don't have this knowledge, we have failed as educators. We haven't taught this in our schools, the sensitivity, this caring, this compassion, and it needs to be for all people, not just, you know, for one particular group. That this hatred must stop. And so I see that we absolutely need to transform Holocaust education to make this connection between the past and to what we're seeing today. We need the firsthand accounts and second generation to tell the stories of the past. We need to stop assignments where, you know, there's these reenactments. That has to stop, because that is no way to teach empathy. As far as literature is concerned, I spent a tremendous amount of time thinking about how to write the assignment, my novel, and making it accessible for all students, of, you know, from our reluctant readers to readers who have difficulties and challenges. We need to make it accessible, yet also have a very broad sense of give a broad picture of information, because I know for all of us that are speaking here tonight that we could spend the rest of our lives studying the Holocaust, and still there's going to be so much more for us to learn. But we need to have a solid foundation, and that's why I wrote the assignment, to give our students a solid foundation with that connection, but then also show how assignments like this and how this history doesn't just impact within the classroom, it impacts a school, it impacts the community, and it impacts, you know, on a global level. And so that's what I'm hoping to see, that our education system starts making these deeper connections, so that our students are out there being allies for all people who experience injustice.
Thank you, Liza. I am seeing some questions that unfortunately we're not going to get to as we don't have time. I'm being mindful of the time. Amber, I do want to offer you the chance to drop maybe any resources or a link to the JCRC in the chat. I know that we do have some educators tuning in who are asking some questions about teaching. So would love for you to drop that in the chat. So look out for that. And like I said, I think we could, and like Liza said, we could spend much longer time speaking about this. It's been a really great conversation. So I do want to wrap, but the conversation doesn't end. So you know how to get in touch with Liza. So, and hopefully you'll know how to get in touch with Amber when she puts her details in the chat. And let me just, and Luke, if you want to go ahead and drop the 9th candle information, but let me also just thank Liza and Amber and for your partnership tonight, for joining us at this event, for engaging in these conversations, very important conversations that we're having. And then finally, I want to thank all our participants who tuned in. So we really appreciate you being here with us. We know May is a busy month. We know Thursday nights are a busy time for folks, but we do thank you all for being here and being part of these conversations. So again, thank you all. And any final remarks from our panelists?
I would just as a one final remark, I really would strongly recommend the assignment. One of the questions you asked, Liza, was who's the book for? Well, I've read it. I loved it. It's very, very readable because it's so fast paced. It's got a really exciting story. But I think also for any educators who might be looking for texts to complement something like Night or Anne Frank's Diary, one of those kind of really canonic works, I think a contemporary piece like this would be something that would be fantastic for students to read side by side. So yeah, it definitely, if you've not read the assignment, do. It's a wonderful book, and thanks again, Amber and Liza, for being part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all, and I hope everyone has a safe and great night. Thank you.